This evening it is my pleasure to introduce Michael Haltzel, who will be your moderator this evening. Dr. Haltzel is Senior Fellow at the Center for Transatlantic Relations at Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. He capped a distinguished career in public service as Senior Foreign Policy Advisor from 1994 until 2005 to Senator Joseph Biden Jr., Ranking Member or Chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He was the lead Democratic Senate staffer at non-NATO and the Balkan policy and was deeply involved in the Bosnia and Kosovo campaigns. He is a member of the Board of Directors of the World Affairs Council, as well as several other very distinguished boards, and is member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He received his MA in Soviet Studies and a PhD in History from Harvard. He will be introducing our other guest speakers this evening, so please join me in welcoming Dr. Michael Haltzel and our distinguished panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming out this evening. I hope it's warmer in the audience than it is up here. CSIS is saving money on heat after 6 o'clock, I think. I guess that's good. No one will fall asleep. Before I introduce our distinguished panelists, I'd like to maybe say a few words to put the Kosovo situation today in historical perspective, and I do this as a lapsed historian who knows that you should never try to cram several hundred years of history into 3 or 4 minutes, but I will try to do it nonetheless. One can say that the topic for this evening is certainly timely, because I think in the coming days we're looking at the potential for a fairly major European crisis. It's one that has long historical roots, and I would characterize it as a familiar tale of two peoples with conflicting claims to the same piece of real estate. For the Serbs, Kosovo is more or less like Jerusalem, and they have made the parallel of Kosovo and Metohija as the parallel to Jerusalem for the Jews. In 1389, there was a famous battle, Kosovopolia, in which a force of European knights, overwhelmingly Serbian, led by Prince Lazar, went out to fight the Turkish Sultan. They lost. It's a date that is considered a sacred one in Serbian history, and Kosovo and Metohija are the homes of some of the most important churches and monasteries of the Serbian Orthodox Church. Kosovo also is home to ethnic Albanians, the oldest people in the Balkans, descendants of the Illyrians who occupied parts of the Western Balkans from classical times. They're mentioned by the Greeks. Before the Slavs, who migrated to the Balkans in the beginning of the 6th century. A lot of the stereotypes that we have about the situation today and the history preceding it, I think, are false. There were Albanian knights who fought on the side of the Serbs at Kosovopolia. 60 years later, it was the Albanians under their own national hero, Skanderbeg, who fought the Turks, while, in fact, Serbs in Kosovo at that time allied themselves with the Turkish Sultan. It is true, however, that in the succeeding centuries under Ottoman rule, Albanians more often than not formed elite military units for the Sultan and furnished many senior government officials to the Ottoman Empire. By the end of the 19th century, the Albanians had replaced the Serbs as the largest group in what's now Kosovo. During the end of the 19th century and then in the two Balkan wars preceding World War I and then in World War I, there were really horrible, fearful massacres carried out by both sides, Serbs and Albanians, and obviously it's not that long ago, and less than 100 years ago, and the bitterness remains. I'll skip over a lot of history and just say that in post-World War II, Tito's communist Yugoslavia, Kosovo Metohija became an autonomous province of Serbia. In 1974, Tito promulgated or instigated a reform in which Kosovo received a seat in the federal presidency of Yugoslavia, making it a de facto socialist republic within the federation with virtual autonomy. All the time that this was going on, the proportion of Serbs as a part of the population in Kosovo continued to decline. It was about 25 or 28% in the early 1970s. It's declined steadily to where it's now about 7 or 8%. There were many reasons. The Albanians had a much higher birth rate than the Serbs. Many Albanians worked abroad in Western Europe, some in the United States, but especially Western Europe, and sent home hard currency with which they paid, as we would say, top dollar, to buy out the Serbs. And then there was coercion. There's no doubt about that either. After Tito's death in 1980, and again I'm really telescoping shamelessly, the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia was in deep trouble. There was a rotating presidency. Centrifugal forces took over. A movement within Serbia arose of Greater Serbia. There were independents in Kosovo. Albanians demonstrated for, at the very least, official status as a constituent republic, not just an autonomous region, and in some cases for outright independence. There were widespread riots in 1981 that were put down by the federal authorities. A Greater Serbia movement arose, which was one of the major factors precipitating the eventual breakup of Yugoslavia. Our panelists tonight may wish to discuss that. With tensions increasing, in 1987, by that time middle-aged, not young politician from Serbia, Slobodan Milosevic, went down to Prishtina, and he gave a famous speech. There had been riots that day with some of the police beating up on ethnic Serbs, and he got up and said, "No one is allowed to beat you anymore." Of course, he became instantly a folk hero. A year and a half later, Milosevic instituted what amounted to a coup d'etat in Serbia, and in 1989 he drastically curtailed Kosovo's autonomy within Serbia. The Kosovar Albanians, under the leadership of the Western-educated intellectual Ibrahim Rugova, turned to not to violence but to civil disobedience. There was a wholesale firing of Kosovar Albanians from the civil service in Kosovo. Schools were closed. The ethnic Albanians set up a network of underground schools, and the nonviolence persisted for almost a decade. But by 1998, the tensions had reached a boiling point. Some of the Kosovars were abandoning nonviolence. They formed the Kosovo Liberation Army, KLA, or UÇK, is the acronym in Albanian. There were clashes with Serbian authorities, reciprocal violence, turning to massacres. By early 1999, Milosevic embarked upon a full-scale program of ethnic cleansing. Hundreds of thousands of Kosovar Albanians were pushed out into Albania and to Macedonia, and in March of 1999, one had the rather unbelievable sight of people being loaded onto railroad boxcars in Europe. I remember one of the commissioners of the European Union, responsible for human rights, Emma Bonino, said to me afterwards, she said, "My God, it looked like Schindler's List."